All right. Well, today we're going to talk about the 7 elements of art. So go ahead and write down at the top of your paper this sentence: Sour limes from Spain taste very citrusy. So, what are the elements of art? Well, one way to think of the elements of art is to think of them as building blocks, or another way is to think of them as raw ingredients. Basically, they are the essential building blocks that we use to create the artwork. So, they're like the blocks, they're like the ingredients. Now, the first element we're going to look at is the simplest and most basic. It's the line. A line can be described as a continuous mark made on a surface by a moving point. Lines are extremely useful and versatile. One of the ways that we can use a line is by varying its line weight or thickness. One of the ways that we can use line weight is to help us to describe edges of forms. We can also use line weight to describe shadows and light. And finally, if we put enough lines together, we can actually create values using lines as well. If you continue a line all the way around until it meets itself again, you've created our second element, which is shape. Shape is simply enclosed space defined by lines, values, textures, or space, or any combination of these elements. Shapes can be classified into one of two categories: organic and geometric. Organic shapes are generally more free-flowing and are found in nature. Geometric, on the other hand, are generally made of more straight edges and are more jagged. Another feature of shapes is that they're always flat or 2D. Look at this painting by Jacob Lawrence. Here we have a woman who's doing laundry. Notice how the organic shapes that he's created mimic the movement of water, whereas the geometric shapes represent the hanging clothes behind her. Our third element is form, very close to shape. Whereas shape is always 2D and flat, form is always 3D and encloses volume. Examples of form could be cubes, cylinders, or spheres. In fact, if you can master how to draw each of these forms in space, you can pretty much draw anything. Anything can pretty much be broken down into one of these three forms. We can add value to further enhance these forms. And when we do this, basically what we're doing is describing light and how it changes across the form. Speaking of value, this brings us to our fourth element, value. Value can be described as the lightness or darkness of a tone. It depends on how much light a surface reflects. In fact, value is reflected light. Specifically, it is the amount of reflected light. Think about it like this. Every form has planes. Some planes are facing the light, some planes are facing away from the light. The planes that are facing the light will be lightest in value, whereas the planes facing away from the light will start to darken in value. So in other words, shading is simply a function of describing a plane's relationship to its light source. Various values are also called tones. Generally, we need at least 3 different tones in order to show form. We need darks, midtones or halftones, and also lights. When we use the full range of value, we can create the illusion of form. However, many young artists struggle in pushing their darks dark enough, so you might hear me tell you to push your darks. The fifth element is space. Space can be described as the distance between, around, above, or below, within an object. Space is implied in drawings, but it is real in 3D work. Consider these 4 triangular compositions. Right now, each triangle has the same visual impact. However, by changing the framing or spacing around each triangle, we can actually change the visual impact. One of the best ways to create space in a drawing is by using overlaps. Overlaps help to show what is in front of what, and therefore produce visual depth. You can also change the size of objects. Objects in the distance will appear smaller and will also create depth. Space can also be described in terms of positive and negative. Here, the black silhouetted Batman shape is the positive space. The yellow background shape surrounding the positive space is known as the negative space. If you look carefully, the negative space is creatively disguising the penguin in this design. Space is also utilized in perspective drawing. Our 6th element is texture. Texture deals with the surface quality or feel of an object. Texture is often one of the last elements utilized in drawing. Typically, we need to draw form first using value and put texture on top of that form. I like to describe texture as salt. Without it, a drawing will be bland. However, if you use too much, it will tend to overpower the drawing. So, a little bit of texture goes a long way. Often, a suggestion of texture is enough. This brings us to our final element, color. Color can be described using 3 different properties: hue, intensity, and value. Color, just like value, is reflected light. Whereas value is the amount of reflected light, color refers to the quality of that light. Hue is basically color. They mean pretty much the same thing. The second property is intensity. It pretty much means the purity of the color, how bright or how dull it is. The last property is value. This refers to the relative lightness or darkness of a color. Think of a violet as a dark value and a yellow as a light value. So there you have it. Those are the 7 elements of art. These are the building blocks. They are the ingredients that we as artists use. There are tools in our tool belt. We combine these together in different ways to produce artwork.